Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I've got Steven Pesavento with me. Steven, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Chris.
Excited to have you. And just so the audience knows who you are, I'm just going to quickly introduce you. So you're the host of the Investor Mindset Podcast. You're also an active investor who curates commercial real estate investments for clients at Von Fitch Capital. You've raised tens of millions of dollars. You've successfully cycled that through multiple assets. And you started off with single family. I love this stuff, so I'd love to dive into all of this in our interview today. But you started off with single family as an operator. You flipped over 200 houses in under 3 years. That's an incredible accomplishment. Quite a big number there. You did that prior to expanding into commercial to focus on building a business around working with your ideal client, who is a successful high-income earner like yourself, interested in investing to create flexibility and independence. Love that. Picking your brain for sure on this one. And then through your top-rated podcast and private investor community, you bring together real estate investors to not only learn, but also learn how to put these strategies to work in their lives. So Steven, welcome once again. Happy to have you here today.
Hey, super good to be here.
So where did this all start? I mean, did you always love real estate? I always love learning about like when you flip the switch in your mind of like, I need to get into real estate, quitting a job. Did you have a background like as an engineer or a business degree or something like that?
Yeah, so I have, a similar feeling, I think, to a lot of other people. There's always been a drive and interest in real estate, but it was one of those things where it wasn't always something that I really believed was possible. I'm a big believer in personal development and growth, but in order for me to even decide to do real estate, I had to grow personally and professionally. Because, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a chef like Emeril Lagasse, or I wanted to flip houses like Bob Vila. And I started out cooking and work in that direction, but realized like lifestyle wise, that wasn't the right fit. So I started out my career in management consulting, worked in that space for some time, moved over to technology in the startup space, which is actually when I moved out to Boulder, Colorado. And then from there, continued down that path. And when I finally jumped into real estate, it was one of those things where I didn't really necessarily believe that it was possible. I didn't really believe that I had the skills, the connections, the relationships, any of those things that were necessary, let alone having the capital to be able to go and invest. But I was fortunately in a place where I was extremely clear. And I feel like all of those roadblocks mentally and emotionally were pushed out of the way just for that moment. And when I made that decision, I decided to go all in. And I essentially cut myself off from all other options and was able to quickly scale. And, in just about 3 years' time, we had flipped over 200 houses.
Awesome. And when you say we, did you have like a partner, a friend, or did you have a few people you started this with at first?
Yeah, so my company, Von Fitch Capital, we had flipped about 75 houses a year. I had a business partner who was working on the ground out in North Carolina, a business partner on the ground in Minnesota, and collectively bought houses directly from sellers, spent money direct on marketing to go direct to seller, and then turned those houses either through renovation or through selling those directly to another investor or homeowner, in as-is condition. And so in that time, we were able to scale a nice business, able to make more money than I'd ever really made in my life before, and also learn a lot because, sometimes there's these challenges that you really can't expect are going to be coming up. You really have to expect that there's going to be challenges and problems along the way, but it was through actually doing it, through taking that action and learning, okay, well, what do I like about this? What do I not like about this? And how do I want that business to look in the future? And so, since moving out of that space, we've scaled into multifamily and, scaled into focusing on, hey, how can we serve that ideal client? Who's that person that we want to work with on a consistent basis? And what I realized was, and a lot of entrepreneurs, you might be feeling the same way. Maybe you're working with clients that don't really share the same values. Maybe you're working with clients that are a one-time sale and you never have an opportunity to work with them again. For some people, that's exactly what they want. But for me, what I was really looking for was, how can I build something that continues to compound on itself? How can I spend $1 today that ends up turning into $5 tomorrow, or at least spend $1 to make $1 and have that end up leading to consistently building a large customer list? And in my flipping business, that wasn't the case. We were spending a ton of money to go and acquire this lead. It was a one-time sale to have somebody who's going to sell their house at a discount so that we could then turn around and renovate it and resell it. And I looked at it. It was a phenomenal way to make a lot of money. It was a phenomenal way to hustle and and grind. And I will always keep that skill of being able to flip a house, be able to find a house. And I know without a doubt, I can go make $20,000 or $30,000 in a few months' time with this skill set. But I looked at and I started asking myself the question, well, what do I want that business to look like in the future? And that led me to thinking about ideal client, to thinking about how and who I want to be working with and how that's going to end up be structured. And that's kind of what led to what Von Finch Capital has been doing today.
I love what you said there about ideal client, because like you mentioned, so many entrepreneurs, we just take on clients because they're going to pay us. We see the dollar signs. We're really interested in the money maybe, but it may be just a one-time thing, right? A lot of people who own wholesaling businesses, for example, they feel that pain. I mean, I worked with one closely when I got my foot in the door of real estate in Houston. And that was their main gripe was, you're doing all this marketing to attract people who are selling. I mean, sure, maybe they have friends who may have distressed properties, but really they're private about it. A lot of times people are embarrassed about the situation they're in. They're not really telling others. So the chances of you getting multiple deals from a single person are pretty low. And so I love what you said there about finding your ideal client, getting very clear on what it is that you want to do. And so how did you get clear on that? Did you start writing things down? Did you have a whiteboard that just said, this is your goal, focus solely on that? Because I know a lot of people in my audience are struggling with getting clear right now. So would love any tips on that.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that I work with clients on directly. And the reason that I'm so clear on this is because it's something that I'm consistently and iteratively doing myself. I have to continuously do this every single day, continue to check in, understand what direction I'm going, what is it that I want, why do I want it, and who can help me get there. And so through this process, I have a podcast named The Investor Mindset, right? And we interview some of the top thought leaders and real estate investors, and just people who are out there doing successful things. And what we really dive into is the thoughts and beliefs and how people's thoughts and beliefs end up leading directly the actions that they take in their life. And so when it comes down to understanding how people's thinking ends up leading directly to what happens, after you interview hundreds of people, you end up starting to realize, well, there's some key principles that end up playing out to being consistent across Chris Voss to Joe Fairless to Mark Manson to the author of One Thing, Jay Papasan, and many others in between. And so what you end up realizing is that it's actually pretty simple. It's just not always easy to do. And so one of those principles happens to be that they get extremely clear on what they want. And they continuously ask that question of, what do I want? What does that look like? Well, what are the details of that? And why is that important to me? And it's less about this idea of purpose being that driving force, even though that really is. It's a big motivator, but it's understanding, what do I want that business to look like, and really being able to continuously define that what, because you can go out and hustle and build a business, but if it ends up being something that doesn't really represent what you want in the end, then you're going to be disappointed, and you're going to work all of that time, put all that energy, when if you would have just taken some time up front to get clear, you could have avoided, some of those big challenges. And so, we could talk more about some of these 5 principles, but you guys can just go grab the resource over at theinvestormindset.com/principles. It's theinvestormindset.com/principles. And we've outlined, a pretty deep dive into what these 5 pieces of success are and exactly how you can go about getting clear yourself, because that's the number one thing you've got to do. You've got to ask yourself that question over and over again, and then bounce it off some other people around you, get some other people to challenge that, so that before you step into action, which is what you have to do, you have to make a decision, that you can get clear on what path you're trying to go down. And so even if you end up running into a roadblock, you can just, I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to find a new way down the map, because I know that that's where I want to land.
Definitely. So once you started, and I know you said this is a daily activity, getting clear, understanding, why am I doing this? Why is it important to me? What are my ultimate goals? When you started to get clear, I guess, how quickly did you turn off the flipping business and shift your focus? Was it like a transition period, or did you just say, I'm going to start referring these leads out and just focusing solely on this new thing?
Yeah. So I'm a person who, when I make a decision, I have to go and do it. But this was a decision that I really took some time on. I really took some time to understand, what is it about this? I've got this, this intuition. I've got this feeling that I want to make a change. I've got this feeling that the business is starting to have an undue amount of risk in comparison with what I am comfortable with, I'm flipping houses 1,600 miles away. Even if I move to a wholesaling only business, I'm still going to have an immense amount of risk because I'm spending so much up front on marketing. It takes time to end up playing out. So I was looking at, well, how can I build the business that I really want? And so what did I do? Is the same thing I recommend all my clients do and recommend all my friends and people that are in my network, is to go out and figure out, well, what you want and then who is already doing it. So you go find that mentorship piece. You go find that coach. You go find that peer that's going down the path that you can share. Hey, well, I'm actually doing this right now. I'm really, really good at XYZ. My unique ability, the thing that I'm the best at is this, this, and this. I'm wondering, how does that fit into this industry? How does that fit into this strategy? And through talking with a number of people, interviews, one-on-one coffees, conversations, connections, coming to those people with value first so that they're interested in having some kind of relationship, not just that I'm taking. But I was able to then understand the business a little bit more deeply. And when I decided, it was probably about 12 to 18 months before I finally decided that we're going to move that direction. I started to put some pillars down in the sand, put some foundation out for us to start moving and start tiptoeing over to that direction. But I took it slow because it was actually against my normal, what I really, really want to do. I'd want to just make that move happen. But I also knew that I had 15 people on my team that were relying on us to be able to create income. I also knew that we had spent, tens of thousands of dollars a month on marketing, and it takes 3 to 6 months for those leads to come out. So I went the responsible route, and I slowly transitioned as I was making my way there. Is that the right way to do it? It was the right way for me at that time. But what I ended up realizing about it was it gave me some time to make sure that I was heading in the right direction. It gave me some time I was making steps there, right? Because we always want to take action after we make a decision, but it also gave me a little bit of space to allow things to happen. But I'm going to tell you, moving from single family to large commercial or multifamily, it is a slow moving barge when you get out of the single family space. And so it's a place where you have to come with that patience, where you can go and do things much bigger, but it takes some time to build that momentum. And so that's one of the biggest things is when you're in the middle of a transition, it's so important to remember that when you're taking a step from here to another spot, from where you are today to where you want to go, and there's that chasm in between, sometimes you might take a dip. You might have to take that ego hit of taking a step down in order to laterally be able to climb up. But when you've got that vision, when you can see what's possible, when you know why you're doing it, and you've got other people around you who have been able to show you that it's possible to do, it's worth it to take a couple steps off the trail and go down a little bit before you climb back up that mountain and then accelerate at a much higher pace. But you have to be emotionally ready for that and have people around you to support you.
That's extremely powerful what you just said there. So I'd like everyone to go back and listen to that again. My next question is, how do you really align yourself with those people? I'm sure you're in masterminds. I see you're on a Bigger Pockets podcast. You're flying around, networking with people. You've built a business in an amazing manner where you can go travel, right? I think you're going to Hawaii either after this, or I caught you before your trip. So I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and talk. But how do you meet these people? Like, are you intentional about the groups that you join, or do you cut them loose if they're not really seeming to be a good fit? Would love your insight on that.
Yeah. I mean, I love travel. Right now, I'm actually in LA. I live in Denver, so I'm recording out of the corner of an office. Not exactly my ideal spot, but for me, it's all about, hey, how can I go and do the things that I really want to do? So when it comes to finding a mentor, I first off, I want to find people who already doing or have done what I want to do. If they're currently doing it and they're at the level that I want to be doing it at, that's phenomenal. If they recently were doing it and they recently had that experience of growth, it's even better because they understand exactly what those steps are. And they're less hurt by that curse of knowledge of not knowing what it was like to not know what you now know. And so I look for those kind of people. I like to have a variety of different folks that are in my network. I really believe in paying for mentors. I had a huge apprehension for it. I traded my way into my first mentorship. I went out and found ways to be of value and service to other people in order to have them invite me into their network. I think that's a great strategy. But I look for two types of people. I look for people who are going to be mentors, people who are going to put on that mentor hat that have already done it or are doing it and can guide me down that path. And then I look for coaches, people who are, maybe they've done it, maybe they're also a mentor, but there's somebody who's able to look at me in my situation, ask the right questions, help guide me to make the decision that I already know I'm capable of making. But they're able to be that outside force, that outside vision. So I have multiple coaches myself. I'm a coach to multiple clients. And the reason why that's valuable is because even if somebody hasn't been down that same path, they can see where those footsteps need to be, and they can help you realign and refocus so that you know exactly where you're supposed to go. Because sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in our head, and our wife or our husband or our friends are not always the best person to give us that hard charging feedback of challenging us and asking that question. Hey, are you really in alignment with what you wanted to do? Hey, you said you wanted to do this. I just want to check, is that still important to you? And somebody to actually hold you accountable. And the accountability piece is a very small part, but it ends up kind of building an automatic accountability when you have a coach, when someone is going to be checking in and they're not going to be afraid to call you on your BS. And so that's what I found. And that's usually what I look for. I try to blend coaching and mentorship between different people, or sometimes the same person.
Very powerful. And what you said there about coaches, that is so true. I mean, a lot of times it's frustrating, but it's also very, I guess, helpful that they ask questions. They don't just tell you. A good coach won't tell you the answer. They will ask you questions so that you have that breakthrough and you arrive to the answer that you already know. Maybe you already know you're capable of it, or you already know the answer to a question, but they pull it out of you in a way where you have that breakthrough moment. So that is very valuable for sure. But also mentors.
If I tell you something, you're going to say, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. But if you tell me something, or you have that realization yourself, you're going to remember it. You're going to embody it. It's going to mean so much more. Right. That's huge.
That's so huge. And that's kind of like the teach a man to fish versus just telling them or giving them the fish, right? I had a coach, for example, I have my license. I'm still kind of in the real estate agent land. I shifted from wholesaling. So this conversation is really great because it's helping me get clear on, well, what do I want, right? Houston's having all these freezes and stuff, and I'm like worried about listings. Like, man, are the pipes broken? The house is vacant. And so I'm starting to see the struggles personally. And I'm like, well, how do I build more of a business where I can travel and not be worrying about little things like that and someone else's boots on the ground, for example? So just having those things. But I had a coach tell me, like, Chris, I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to make you find it because I need to teach you how to fish. That way you stop asking the same questions. Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, high performers, we like to just ask questions, right? I don't want to look for it. Just tell me what the answer is, right? But then you keep on going and asking the same thing. You don't ever really learn the lesson. So very great stuff. Mentors and coaches. I like how you had a distinction between those two, because a lot of us, I would have thought that was the same thing almost.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference, right? And I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe you guys have experienced this yourself. Maybe it's with somebody at the gym. Maybe you've got to coach yourself. But I know from my experience, there's times when I'm talking with my coach and he's asking me questions, and man, I am uncomfortable. I'm mad. I'm angry. I do not want to answer these questions. And that's usually actually exactly what I need in that moment. It's actually flipping that. It's part of that change to your mindset, part of seeing those challenges as an opportunity, as something that I need to embrace. It's usually when I feel that discomfort. If I'm conscious, if I can bring myself conscious, I usually can say to myself, oh, this is exactly what I need. And all of a sudden he'll know exactly when it comes, because all of a sudden I'll start laughing, because I'm laughing at myself for how silly it is that I'm getting angry when this is actually exactly what I needed in that moment.
And also just going off the coaching and exercise example, a lot of us don't have the self-discipline to really push ourselves, right? I think Muhammad Ali said, I only start counting sit-ups when it hurts or something like that, or push-ups. I forget which one it was, but a lot of us stop ourselves like at that comfort level, right? 20 push-ups, 20 sit-ups, it's good. I'm going to call it a day. A coach is going to push you past that. That uncomfortable zone is where you actually grow. And I love how you said you just started chuckling because you're like, why am I ignoring this? This is what I actually need to get to the next level. That's what it takes. It takes someone else. And I mean, if you ever did like football camp or anything like that in high school, I mean, when you're running 40s and your coach is yelling at you and you don't want to be the last person, right? You push yourself in a way that you wouldn't if you were just jogging on the field by yourself. So that's another powerful lesson right there. I know we got a couple of minutes left, so I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got other appointments. What's one tip that you would recommend the audience implement today? I mean, when they're trying to get clear, when they're trying to find the next step, or maybe join a mastermind, I mean, is there like a question that you think that they should ask themselves? Obviously, the one thing you mentioned, that book, that's a great one, but any feedback on that?
Yeah, I think there's different stages towards getting clear, right? So you're going to have a lot of ideas of what you could do. One of those 5 principles that I talked about, you guys should definitely grab that resource. And I know you're going to include it in the show notes, but
Yeah.
one of the big tips, one of the big things that all these successful people have in common is that they're extremely focused. They're doing 1, maybe 2 core activities, and they're only doing that second core activity after the first one's been successful. Now, everything that they do is going to be driving towards that one specific thing, that focus, or those 2 things. And the reason for that is because it takes a lot of energy and motion in order to actually get that momentum that you need to be able to start feeling that success happen, to be able to go from not having belief and borrowing someone's belief into experiencing and making that belief your own. And so you need to have enough energy going in that direction. So the biggest tip, the biggest advice is sit down and brainstorm all of the things you could possibly do. Write it down on a piece of paper, capture list, up on your whiteboard, whatever it might be, and then go through and make that decision, comparing and contrasting and crossing things out and getting down until you're focused on your 1 or 2 things. That is super critical. It makes everything else that much easier, because when you can show up as that guy or that gal, the person who is that person, the person who goes out and, is the e-commerce person, or is the real estate person, or is the broker, or is the person who works in this specific market or this specific niche or this specific strategy. Or for me, I'm, multifamily mindset guy. I'm the guy who's focused on multifamily and focused on coaching on mindset and helping people really unlock not only financial freedom, but also their own ability to live fulfilled. And so you got to figure out what is going to be that thing for you. And then you put that together and you make a decision and you put everything you got into it.
And that's how you see the momentum. Because if you're too scattered, you're not going to see that success, right? You're not going to give everything enough energy to really get that momentum that you need to get past the chasm of despair, I guess we could call it. A lot of people fall into that and they're like, well, I'm not seeing progress. I'm not seeing momentum. Let me try this. Wholesaling, not really working. Maybe I should buy a deal from a wholesaler and flip it, lose a bunch of money, and then they quit. You have to stay consistent with that one thing long enough. So that is a great takeaway. Thank you so much, Steven. I'm definitely going to drop that in the show notes, the link to the 5 principles. Where can our audience go to learn more about you? Obviously, listen to your podcast and all that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely check out the podcast on YouTube, on iTunes, on Spotify. The Investor Mindset, top 200 investing podcast, top 1,000 out of all podcasts. Highly recommend it. That's a great place to start. If you're looking to reach out to me directly, just direct message me on any platform. I make myself accessible, even though I'm fairly busy. But let me know where you came from. Let me know what show you're listening to or what you loved about it.
Yeah, perfect. Everyone listening, make sure that you tell him you heard him on my show, because it always helps whenever they come back and they say, Chris, like I had 5 people from your show, from our conversation, message me. It also helps me understand, like, am I bringing you what you want to hear? Am I bringing you the right topics and subjects? And am I extracting the value from Steven adequately? Because he's got so much knowledge in there. I got to ask the right questions, right? So that's all very helpful. Thank you once again, everyone who's listening and joining us. Make sure to check out his podcast, leave a review on mine, and I'll drop all those links in the show notes. So Steven, thank you once again. Really enjoyed this time together and extracted a lot of nuggets that I'm going to apply to my own real estate business.
I love it. This was amazing. It was great serving you guys, and I look forward to the next time we all get to hang out.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.